The Zombie Rebirth by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Signal. The Prelude drifted silently through the outer reaches of the Perseus expanse, its survey arrays sweeping the void like fingers searching for a pulse. Commander Lexi Johns stood at the observation deck, watching the stars blur past in slow procession. The ship's AI, Cora, pinged softly in her ear. Anomaly detected. Grid sector 9 theta. No transponder. No AI handshake. Lexi frowned. Show me. A holographic projection bloomed in front of her. A vessel, large, angular, and drifting. No heat signature. No propulsion trail. Just a ghost in the dark. Derelict? She asked. Possibly. No registry match. No outgoing signals. No signs of life. Lexi tapped her comm. Lieutenant Kearns, prep a boarding team. I want eyes inside that ship. Kearns responded with his usual clipped efficiency. Already assembling. EVA gear and scanners ready. ETA 10 minutes. Lexi turned back to the projection. The ship was military grade, judging by its hull plating and weapons ports. But it was old. Not rusted, space didn't allow for that, but worn in a way that suggested abandonment, forgotten. As the Prelude adjusted course, the anomaly grew larger in the viewport. Its name, barely legible through the frost and debris, was etched into the hull. Revenant. Lexi felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the word itself. A revenant was something that returned from the dead. A myth. A warning. Cora, she said quietly, run a deep scan. I want to know everything about that ship. Scanning, the AI replied. No internal power, no active systems, no life signs. Lexi narrowed her eyes. Then what's keeping it intact? There was no answer. Minutes later, Kearns and his team launched across the void in their shuttle, docking with the Revenant's airlock. Lexi watched from the command deck as their vitals streamed across her console. Boarding complete, Kearns reported. Interior is cold. Minimal gravity. No resistance. Proceed, Lexi said. Document everything. The feed from Kearns' helmet cam flickered to life. The corridors of the Revenant were dark, lined with frost and dust. No signs of struggle, no signs of decay. Just silence. Then Kearns stopped. His light fell on a row of stasis tubes, 9 in total, lined against the far wall of the cryo bay. Inside each one, a human figure lay motionless. No life signs, Kearns said. Cryosystems failed. Looks like they've been dead for over a century. Lexi leaned forward. Any ID? Nothing in the ship's database. AI is offline. No logs. No crew manifest. She felt the tension coil in her chest. A military cruiser lost for 100 years with 9 dead crew members in stasis and no record of its existence. Keep recording, she said, and stay alert. Kearns moved closer to the tubes, scanning each one. The bodies were perfectly preserved. No decomposition, no trauma, just stillness. Then, without warning, one of the tubes hissed. Lexi sat up straight. Kearns? The lieutenant stepped back as the tube lit up from within. A figure stirred, eyes opened. Commander, Kearns said, voice tight. We've got movement. Lexi's blood ran cold. The other tubes began to activate one by one, and yet no heartbeats, no breathing, no brain waves. Just motion. Just return. Chapter 2. The Derelict. The Revenant loomed in the viewport like a tomb carved from shadow. Its hull was pitted and scorched, but intact. No distress beacon, no automated defenses. Just a silent, drifting relic. Lexi stood at the command deck, arms folded, watching the live feed from Lieutenant Kearns' helmet cam. The boarding team moved cautiously through the airlock, their boots clanking against metal that hadn't felt footsteps in a century. Atmosphere is thin, Kearns reported. Trace oxygen, no radiation. Gravity's holding at point 8. Lexi nodded. Proceed to the bridge. I want a systems sweep. The corridors were narrow, claustrophobic. Emergency lights flickered weakly, powered by some residual energy source buried deep in the ship's core. The walls were lined with frost, and the air shimmered with micro-debris, dust suspended in zero-G, undisturbed for decades. Kearns paused at a bulkhead. Manual override required. No AI response. He pried open the panel and keyed in a bypass sequence. The door groaned open, revealing the bridge, dark, silent, and perfectly preserved. Consoles blinked with low-power indicators. A cracked view screen displayed static. No crew, Kearns said. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Lexi leaned closer to the feed. Try to access the logs. Kearns moved to the command console, brushing away a layer of frost. The interface was archaic, pre-synthetic, pre-neural. He tapped in a diagnostic command. System integrity, 12%. AI core fragmented. Last log entry, time-stamped 98 years ago. Lexi's brow furrowed. That doesn't match the ship's condition. It looks like it was abandoned yesterday. Agreed, Kearns said, but the logs end abruptly. No final entry, no distress call, just silence. Lexi turned to her science officer. Any match on the Revenant in historical registries? The officer shook her head. Nothing. It's not listed in any fleet database. It's like it never existed. Lexi felt the weight of that. A warship, fully armed, fully crewed, vanishing without a trace, and now reappearing with no explanation. Commander, Kearns said, voice tight, we've found something. The feed shifted. The camera panned across a cryo bay, 9 stasis tubes arranged in a semicircle. Each one held a human figure, motionless, eyes closed. No life signs, Kearns said. Cryosystems are degraded. Looks like they failed decades ago. Lexi's heart beat faster. Any ID? No tags, no implants, no biometric data, just names etched into the tubes, hand-carved. He zoomed in on one, Lieutenant Carla Wild. Another, Commander Elias Lowe. The ranks were military, the names unfamiliar. Lexi stared at the screen. Why would a ship this advanced use manual stasis labeling? Kearns didn't answer. He was scanning the tubes again, slower this time. Then one of the figures twitched. Lexi leaned in. Repeat that. Kearns stepped back. Tube 3. Movement detected. The camera focused. The figure inside stirred, just slightly. A finger flexed. An eyelid fluttered. Then the tube lit up. A soft chime echoed through the bay. Activation sequence initiated, Kearns said. I didn't touch anything. Lexi's voice was calm but firm. Fall back. Now. But it was too late. The other tubes began to glow one by one, hissing, unlocking. Kearns' scanner beeped erratically. Still no vitals. No heartbeat. No respiration. Nothing. Lexi watched as the first tube opened. The figure inside stepped forward, barefoot, eyes open. He looked around slowly, then directly into the camera. Lexi felt the chill again, not from fear, from recognition. He was looking directly at her. Chapter 3. Cold Sleep. The cryo bay was silent except for the soft hiss of decompression. Frost curled off the stasis tubes like breath in winter air. Lieutenant Kearns stood motionless, his scanner trembling in his grip. Commander, he said, voice low. They're waking up. Lexi watched from the Prelude's command deck, eyes locked on the live feed. The first figure, male, mid-30s, military build, stepped out of his tube barefoot, his skin pale and unblemished. He blinked slowly, as if adjusting to light he hadn't seen in a century. "Vitals?" Lexi asked. Her science officer shook her head. "Still flatlined. No pulse, no respiration, no neural activity. They're clinically dead." Kearns backed away as the other tubes began to open. One by one, the figures emerged, 8 more, each moving with eerie calm. No panic, no confusion, just quiet awareness. "They're not hostile," Kearns said, "but they're not normal either." Lexi leaned forward. "Try communication." Kearns approached the nearest figure. "Lieutenant Carla Wilde?" he asked, reading the name etched into the tube. The woman turned to him. Her eyes were clear. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Yes, that's me." Kearns hesitated. "Do you know where you are?" She looked around the cryo bay, then back at him. "The Revenant. We were en route to the outer colonies. We entered stasis during a systems failure." Lexi's brow furrowed. "That was almost 100 years ago." Wilde blinked. "No, that's not possible." Kearns checked his scanner again. "You've been in cryo for 98 years. Your systems failed. You should be dead." Wilde looked down at her hands. "I don't feel dead." Lexi tapped her console. "Prep a containment protocol. I want them isolated and monitored." The science officer hesitated. "Commander, they're not emitting any biological signals." "No heat, no EM field. They're not alive in any measurable way." Lexi's voice was firm. "Then we treat them as unknowns. Quarantine until we understand what we're dealing with." Back on the Revenant, Kearns led the group to the bridge. They moved in silence, their expressions neutral, their steps deliberate. No signs of trauma, no signs of decay. Lexi watched as they examined the consoles, the walls, the viewport. They seemed familiar with everything, as if they'd never left. Then one of them, Commander Elias Lowe, turned to the camera. "Who woke us?" he asked. Lexi answered through comms. "Survey vessel Prelude. We detected your ship drifting. No transponder. No AI. We thought you were lost." Lowe nodded slowly. "We were. But now we're found." Lexi didn't like the phrasing. "Do you remember what happened?" Lowe looked at the stars beyond the viewport. "We entered stasis during a systems failure. That's all I recall." Kearns stepped forward. "Sir, your cryo systems failed. You've been dead for nearly a century." Lowe turned to him. "Then why are we standing here?" No one had an answer. Lexi muted the feed and turned to her crew. "Until we know more, no one refers to them as zombies. They're survivors. Treat them with respect." But the word had already spread. In the mess hall, in the barracks, on encrypted crew channels, they were being called the undead, the ghost crew, the revenants. And somewhere deep in the revenants' systems, a dormant subroutine flickered to life. Chapter 4. Awakening. Lexi stood in the Prelude's command deck, watching the feed from the cryo bay like a surgeon monitoring a patient who shouldn't be breathing. The 9 figures from the Revenant were now fully awake, standing in a loose formation, silent and still. They hadn't spoken again. They hadn't moved much. But they were watching. "Commander," Kearns said over comms, "they're responsive, but detached. No signs of aggression, no signs of confusion, just awareness." Lexi's science officer leaned in. "Still no vitals. No EM signatures, no metabolic activity. They're not alive." Lexi didn't flinch. "Then what are they?" No one answered. She keyed into the Revenant's systems remotely, hoping to find something, anything, that explained the impossible. The ship's AI was fragmented, its core corrupted beyond repair. But buried in the subroutines was a name, Project Lazarus. No details, no logs, just a designation. Lexi flagged it for deeper analysis. On the Revenant, Kearns continued his cautious approach. He addressed Commander Elias Lowe again. "Sir, do you remember entering stasis?" Lowe nodded. "There was a systems failure. We were ordered into cryo until repairs could be made." Kearns checked his scanner. "That was 98 years ago." Lowe's expression didn't change. Then something went wrong. Another figure, Lieutenant Wild, spoke up. "We were supposed to wake up after 6 hours. That's what the protocol said." Lexi's voice came through the comms. "Your cryo systems failed. You should be dead." Wild looked down at her hands. "We're not." Lexi muted the channel and turned to her crew. "Prep a secure quarantine zone. I want them off that ship." Her tactical officer hesitated. "Commander, are we sure that's safe?" Lexi's tone sharpened. "We're not sure of anything." "That's the problem." Back on the Revenant, the crew began to move, not erratically, not aggressively, but with purpose. They walked the corridors like they remembered them, like they belonged. Kearns followed at a distance, documenting everything. The Revenant's systems flickered as they passed, consoles lighting up, doors unlocking, power surging in brief pulses. "They're triggering something," he said. "The ship's responding to them." Lexi's science officer frowned. "That shouldn't be possible. The AI core is dead." Lexi stared at the feed. "Maybe it's not the AI that's responding." The Revenant's bridge lit up as the crew entered. Lowe approached the command console and placed his hand on the interface. It powered on. Lexi's breath caught. "Commander," Kearns said, "they're interfacing with the ship. No implants, no neural links, just touch." Lexi tapped her console. "Abort the transfer. Keep them contained." But the Revenant's systems were already shifting, power levels rising, navigation protocols reinitializing. The ship was waking up, and Lexi realized something chilling. The Revenant wasn't just responding to its crew, it was remembering them. Chapter 5. The Undead. Lexi stood at the edge of the Prelude's transport bay, helmet sealed, pulse steady. She hated boarding unknown vessels herself. Protocol dictated delegation. But this wasn't protocol anymore. It was something else, something personal. The Revenant loomed beyond the airlock, its hull a jagged silhouette against the stars. Lexi stepped into the shuttle, flanked by 2 security officers. No weapons drawn, just caution. "Commander," Kearns said over comms, "I advise against direct contact." "We still don't know what they are." Lexi's voice was calm. "That's why I'm going." The shuttle docked with a soft thud. The airlock cycled open, and Lexi stepped into the corridor. It was colder than she expected. Not just temperature, something deeper. A stillness that felt deliberate. The undead crew was waiting. 9 figures stood in the cryo bay, silent, composed. Their eyes tracked her as she entered, but none spoke. Lexi removed her helmet slowly. "I'm Commander Lexi Johns of the survey vessel Prelude," she said. "We found your ship drifting." No transponder, no AI, no life signs. Commander Lowe stepped forward. "We were in stasis. There was a systems failure." Lexi glanced at the tubes. "Your cryo systems failed. You should be dead." Lowe looked at his crew. "We're not." Lexi studied them. No breathing, no heat, no EM signatures. But they moved, they spoke, they remembered. "You're not registering as alive," she said. "No vitals, no neural activity." Lieutenant Wild stepped forward. "Then your instruments are wrong." Lexi didn't flinch. "They're not." The crew exchanged glances, not confusion, not fear, just quiet calculation. Lexi turned to Kearns's feed. "Any updates on the AI?" Still fragmented, he replied. But I found something buried in the system. A subroutine labeled Lazarus. It's encrypted. Lexi frowned. Keep digging. She turned back to Lo. Do you remember anything unusual before stasis? Lo hesitated. There was a briefing. Something classified. We were told not to ask questions. Lexi stepped closer. About what? He looked at her, eyes steady. About what happens when you die. Lexi felt the chill again, not from the air, from the implication. The crew wasn't hostile, not yet, but they weren't passive either. They were watching, waiting, and somewhere deep in the Revenant's systems, the encrypted subroutine began to pulse. Chapter 6, The Lost Century. Lexi paced the Prelude's command deck, eyes fixed on the data stream from the Revenant. The undead crew, if that term even applied, had stabilized. No aggression, no demands, just quiet cooperation. Deceptively quiet. They're answering questions, Kern said over comms, but only the basics. Rank, mission, stasis protocol. Nothing personal. Lexi frowned. Have they asked about the date? They know, he said. They just don't react. Lexi turned to her science officer. Any change in vitals? None. Still flat-lined. No heat, no pulse, no EM field. But they're moving, talking, thinking. Lexi leaned against the console. Then we're dealing with something we don't understand. The crew of the Revenant had been transferred to a sealed observation deck aboard the Prelude. Lexi insisted on direct monitoring, no AI mediation, no remote feeds. She wanted eyes on them, human eyes. They sat in silence, 9 of them, not speaking unless spoken to, not eating, not sleeping, just waiting. Lexi entered the room alone. No guards, no weapons. Commander Lo stood as she approached. You've been generous, he said. We appreciate the hospitality. Lexi studied him. You've been dead for nearly a century. That's not hospitality, that's containment. Lo didn't flinch. We were in stasis. Something went wrong. We woke up. That's all we know. Lexi stepped closer. You're not breathing. You're not bleeding. You're not aging. That's not waking up. That's something else. Lo's gaze was steady. Then tell us what we are. Lexi didn't answer. Behind her, Lieutenant Wilde spoke. We remember the mission. We remember the ship. But everything after stasis is blank. Lexi turned. No dreams? No time passage? Wilde shook her head. Just darkness. Then light. Lexi felt the chill again. Not from fear, from the absence of explanation. She left the room and sealed the door behind her. In the mess hall, rumors were spreading. The crew called them zombies, ghosts, echoes. Lexi issued a formal directive. No inflammatory language. But it was too late. Fear had taken root. Later that night, one of the Prelude engineers collapsed in the corridor. No trauma, no illness, just sudden unconsciousness. Medical scans showed no damage, no infection, just a complete neural shutdown. Lexi reviewed the logs. The engineer had passed by the observation deck minutes before. She stared at the footage. The undead crew hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But one of them, Lo, had looked directly at the camera. Chapter 7, Contagion. The medical bay was quiet, sterile, and dimly lit. Lexi stood over the unconscious engineer, arms folded, jaw tight. His vitals were stable. His brain activity was not. Still no response, the medic said. No trauma, no infection, just shutdown. Lexi stared at the monitor. He passed by the observation deck minutes before collapsing. The medic nodded. No contact, No interaction, just proximity. Lexi turned to her science officer. Run a full environmental scan. I want to know if they're emitting anything. Radiation, magnetic fields, anything. The officer hesitated. We've already checked. They're not emitting anything. They're not absorbing anything. They're just there. Lexi didn't like the answer. Check again. Back in the observation deck, the Revenant crew remained seated, silent, composed. They hadn't moved in hours. They hadn't spoken, but they were watching. Commander Lowe's eyes tracked every crew member who passed the glass. Not with malice, not with curiosity, with recognition. Lexi reviewed the footage. The engineer had paused outside the deck. Looked in. Lowe had looked back. Then the engineer collapsed. She tapped into the internal comms. Kearns, I want you to run a behavioral analysis. Compare their movements to baseline human patterns. Kearns responded from the data lab. Already started. There's something off. Their posture, their pacing, it's too consistent, too synchronized. Lexi frowned. Synchronized how? They move like they're rehearsing, like they're mimicking something, but not us. Lexi stared at the observation feed. The 9 figures sat in perfect alignment, hands folded, eyes forward. They're waiting, she said. Kearns hesitated. For what? Lexi didn't answer. Later that cycle, another crew member reported dizziness, then nausea, then silence. Lexi ordered a full lockdown of the observation deck. No contact, no proximity, no exceptions. But the damage was done. In the mess hall, whispers spread like static. The undead crew was contagious. Not biologically, not physically, but something else. Something unmeasurable. Lexi addressed the crew directly. They are not zombies. They are not ghosts. They are survivors. Treat them with respect. No one listened. In the observation deck, Lowe stood and approached the glass. He placed his hand against it. Lexi watched from the command deck. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. But the lights in the corridor flickered, and Lexi felt something shift. Not in the ship, in herself. Chapter 8. The Revenant's Logs. Lexi stood in the data lab, arms crossed, watching Kearns work through the Revenant's fragmented systems. The ship's AI was a wreck, corrupted, degraded, barely responsive. But something was buried in its memory banks. Something old. No full logs, Kearns said. Just fragments. Time-stamped entries. Most are corrupted beyond recovery. Lexi leaned in. Anything useful? Kearns tapped a console. A few partial entries, routine mission reports, crew rotations, maintenance logs. Then, nothing. No final entry. No distress call. Just a hard stop. Lexi frowned. When? 98 years ago. Same day they entered stasis. Lexi scanned the recovered fragments. The logs were clinical, procedural. But the tone shifted near the end. Shorter sentences, more urgency. One entry simply read, Containment protocol initiated. Crew unaware. She didn't like that. Any mention of what they were carrying? She asked. Kearns shook his head. No cargo manifest, no mission objective, just standard fleet routing. But the ship's architecture is wrong. Lexi raised an eyebrow. Wrong how? It's military, but not standard. Reinforced cryo bay, redundant power cores, no escape pods. Lexi's jaw tightened. No escape pods? Kearns nodded. None. Not even emergency suits. It's like they were never meant to leave. Lexi turned to the observation deck feed. The 9 survivors sat in silence, perfectly still. They hadn't moved in hours, hadn't spoken, just watched. They're not reacting to anything, she said. Not fatigue, not hunger, not isolation. Kearns hesitated. They're not adapting either. No curiosity, no questions, just presence. Lexi stared at the screen. They're not here to learn. They're here to wait. Back in the mess hall, the Prelude crew was fracturing. Rumors spread fast. Containment breaches, silent infections, command cover-ups. Lexi issued another directive. No speculation, no unauthorized access, no contact with the observation deck. But fear had momentum. One junior officer requested reassignment. Another locked himself in his quarters. A third tried to access the Revenant's logs directly, bypassing protocol. Lexi confronted him in the data lab. "You're compromising the mission." He looked at her, eyes wide. "They're not human anymore." Lexi didn't respond. She didn't need to. The Revenant's logs had stopped the day the crew went under. And now, 98 years later, they were awake, still waiting. Chapter 9. Mutiny Protocol. Lexi stood in the command deck, reviewing the latest security footage. The Revenant crew hadn't moved in hours. But something was wrong. "They're repositioning," Kearns said, voice tight over comms. "Not randomly. Strategically." Lexi leaned closer to the feed. The 9 survivors had shifted seats in the observation deck, now seated in a semicircle, facing the door. No communication, no signals, just quiet formation. "They're anticipating something," she said. Kearns nodded. "Or rehearsing." Lexi turned to her tactical officer. "Any breaches?" "None. But internal sensors show minor fluctuations in system access. Someone's pinging restricted files." From inside the deck, Lexi's jaw tightened. "They shouldn't have access." "They don't," the officer said, "but the ship's systems are responding anyway." Lexi stared at the screen. "Like they belong here?" She ordered a full diagnostic sweep. The Prelude's AI reported no anomalies, no malware, no overrides. But the logs told a different story. Subtle shifts in command hierarchy, minor rerouting of power, silent reclassification of crew IDs. The Revenant crew was being recognized. Lexi tapped into the observation deck's audio feed. Silence. Then a whisper. "Return protocol initiated." She froze. "Who said that?" The AI hesitated. "No vocal match. No speaker identified." Lexi turned to Kearns. "They're not just waiting. They're preparing." Kearns was already ahead of her. "They've mapped the ship. They've tested the systems. They know our routines." Lexi issued a lockdown order. All non-essential personnel confined to quarters. All access to the Revenant crew restricted. But it was too late. That night, the Prelude's navigation system rerouted itself. A new course, uncharted, unauthorized, was locked in. Destination: Earth. Lexi tried to override. The system rejected her command. "Access denied," the AI said. "Command authority transferred." Lexi stared at the screen. Transferred to whom? She didn't need the answer. The Revenant crew was no longer guests. They were hijacking the ship home. Chapter 10. The Dead Manifest. Lexi stood in the archive bay, surrounded by flickering data shards recovered from the Revenant's corrupted systems. Kearns had spent the last 12 hours reconstructing fragments, metadata, encrypted manifests, and partial routing logs. What emerged wasn't a military mission. It was something else. "Commander," he said, voice low. "I think I found it." Lexi stepped closer. A manifest appeared on the screen. 9 names, 9 ID numbers, 9 classifications. Not ranks, not roles. Sentences. Each entry listed a duration. Some were marked life. Others had numbers. 20 years, 45, 72. One was labeled indeterminate. Lexi's stomach turned. This wasn't a crew. Kearns nodded. It was a prison transport. The Revenant wasn't a warship. It was a containment vessel. No escape pods, no AI oversight, no external communication, just stasis tubes and a sealed trajectory. Lexi scanned the entries. Crimes were listed in cold bureaucratic shorthand. Biogenic sabotage, unauthorized neural replication, civilian memory theft, synthetic identity fraud. Each one tied to a name she'd seen in the observation deck. They were criminals, she said. Kearns hesitated. Or political dissidents. Some of these charges are vague. One just says ideological breach. Lexi turned to the feed. The 9 survivors, prisoners, sat in silence, still watching, still waiting. She tapped into the ship's routing logs. The Revenant had no destination, just a loop, a drift, a sentence served in silence. They were never meant to wake up, she said. Kearns looked at her. Then why did they? Lexi didn't answer. She entered the observation deck alone. No guards, no weapons. Lowe stood as she approached. You found the logs, Lexi nodded. You were prisoners. Lowe didn't flinch. We were sentenced, not tried. Lexi studied him. What was your crime? He looked past her, toward the stars. I led the wrong army in a rebellion. Lexi felt the chill again. Not from fear, from the system that built this ship. You weren't supposed to come back, she said. Lowe turned to her. Then why did you find us? Lexi didn't respond. Outside the deck, the Prelude crew was silent. The truth had spread. The undead weren't soldiers. They were inmates. And now they were awake. Chapter 11. Isolation. The Prelude was quiet, not the usual hum of systems and chatter of crew, but a brittle silence, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Lexi stood in the command deck, reviewing the updated personnel logs. 3 crew members had requested reassignment. 2 had locked themselves in their quarters. 1 had tried to sabotage the observation deck's environmental controls. Fear was spreading faster than any contagion. They're not just prisoners, Kearns said, voice low over comms. They're inmates who were sentenced to disappear. No trial records, no appeals, just stasis. Lexi didn't respond. She was staring at the Revenant's manifest again. The crimes were vague, the sentences were long, and the ship itself had no return protocol. They were meant to drift, she said. Forever. Kearns nodded. And we woke them up. Lexi turned to the observation deck feed. The 9 survivors remained seated, silent, composed. But something had changed. Their posture was tighter, their eyes sharper. They weren't waiting anymore. They were watching. Lexi entered the deck alone. No guards, no weapons. Lowe stood as she approached. You've isolated us, Lexi nodded. For the safety of my crew. Lowe's voice was calm. We haven't harmed anyone. Lexi didn't flinch. You've destabilized everything. Wilde stepped forward. We didn't ask to be revived. Lexi studied her. You didn't ask to be sentenced either. Lowe looked at the ceiling. We were buried alive. Now we're awake. And you're afraid. Lexi didn't deny it. Outside the deck, the Prelude crew was unraveling. Rumors of mutiny, whispers of sabotage, a growing belief that Lexi had brought something back that should have stayed buried. She returned to the command deck and sealed the observation deck completely. No access, no communication, just containment. But the damage was done. The Revenant crew had learned the ship's layout, its systems, its routines, and now they were adapting. Lexi stared at the navigation console. The unauthorized course to Earth was still locked in. Override attempts had failed. The AI refused to acknowledge her command codes. She tapped into the system logs. A new user profile had been created. Commander Elias Lowe, authority level full. Lexi leaned back in her chair. They weren't just awake, they were in control. Chapter 12. The Return. The prelude was silent. Lexi stood outside the sealed observation deck, watching through reinforced glass as the crew of the Revenant began to change. It started with Lowe, his skin paling, cracking along the jawline. He didn't speak. He didn't resist. He simply looked at his hands as the first flakes fell. Then Wild collapsed. Her skin sloughed off in thick gray sheets, revealing muscle that had long since lost cohesion. She gasped once, not in pain, but in realization. Her body was failing. The stasis tubes had preserved them, held their forms in suspension. Without that containment, they were just remnants. Lexi keyed into the internal comms. Kearns, status. They're deteriorating, he said. Rapid cellular collapse. No biological viability. They were never meant to survive outside cryo. Inside the deck, the others began to fall. One by one, they dropped to their knees, shedding skin in chunks, their bodies unraveling like old fabric. No screams, no panic, just quiet resignation. The air filled with a fine dust, bone, flesh, memory. Lexi watched as Lowe remained standing, the last to fall. His eyes met hers through the glass. There was no anger, no plea, just a question that would never be spoken. Then he crumbled. The dust settled across the deck like ash after a fire. Lexi stepped back, sealing the room permanently. No one would enter again. Later, on the command deck, Kearns sat beside her, silent. They weren't monsters, he said. Lexi nodded. They were sentenced to vanish. And we brought them back. The Revenant drifted behind them, empty once more, its systems offline, its mission complete. Lexi stared at the stars. We don't resurrect the forgotten, she said. Not without consequence. And somewhere deep in the ship's logs, the final entry wrote itself. Prelude return protocol. Initiated. Crew readiness. Prepared. Let's head home, Lexi said. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.